so let's get going. Just to remind people that if you've got ideas that you want to send to me so I can put out on the Tuesday Club notes on what can we do about global warming, then send it to me. I've had a number so far from vegetarians. I'd like a little bit of balance.
Vegans?
That's worse. I've always used the line that 2 of my 4 kids are vegetarians and I don't know where I went wrong. But I
the other 2 are.
Yeah, I know. So the line I used with one of them who's sitting up the back smirking was, can I please use all the meat in my freezer first before I contemplate vegetarianism? But anyway, we are looking for, look, it's really important with a topic like that it does not become a sort of solid middle class capture. And if you want to look at the Australian election where the Prime Minister paid to working people who were scared. And if we're going to shift the world on topics, we actually have to take the world with us. And that's our challenge. And it's easy enough for people like me to hop on an electric bike, but for a lot of, as I explained to some people, if you're Pacific Island family and the husband and wife have got 6 part-time low-paid jobs between them, and you say to them, what are you going to do about global warming? They'll say, we've just got to survive. And so we've actually got to really... We've got to do more, yes, that's true. Right, so anyway, so I am looking for feedback, and so if people have got ideas of how we measure our carbon footprint and all that sort of thing in a simple way, then if that is possible, then we need to be able to address that. So, one of the topics, and this is a continuation of us looking at an issue in depth over a number of sessions, and tonight we're looking at the east of Christchurch. There's a number of people who have joined us from the east, and it's great to see you. Welcome. So Rachel Puentener and Simon Watts are going to talk to us tonight about how their local community is addressing the issues in their community. So who's first? Rachel. Right. Welcome, Rachel.
Kia koutou. Special welcome also to all the people from the east who are here, as well as the lovely people from everywhere else. So apologies in advance. I need to read from my notes because I've only got a short amount of time, and I'm quite nervous as well. So bear with me in my notes. So as Gary said, I'm Rachel Puentener, and I'm here with Simon Watts, and we're from the How team in South Brighton, South Shore. We both live in the community and have been involved in the Regenerate Christchurch project relating to climate change adaptation in our area. So we haven't quite got there yet. We're at the very beginning of the process. And so we're talking about community engagement because that's really essential to get right on something as important as adapting to climate change. So I've been working for Renew Brighton and have been employed as the convener of the How team. Tonight I'll be talking about the How team model of community engagement that we use for the project, and starting with a bit of an overview of community engagement generally. And then Simon will be talking about some of the community ideas on the issues we're facing in respect to adaptation. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge Sylvia Smyth, who is, as manager of Renew Brighton, actually came up with the concept of the How team, with lots of input from many people, but I'd really like to acknowledge her. We normally do this presentation together, but she's overseas at the moment. So Sylvia found this great graphic about community engagement, and we find it's really helpful as it represents the 3 elements that form good community engagement practice. Often community engagement is just seen purely as a way of informing decisions. That's the top bit of the triangle, so that's where the council comes and asks us what we think about things, like the district plan. But often that kind of engagement feels quite tokenistic. It feels often like a tick box exercise. And that was one of the big issues we had in New Brighton. It can be done well, but often it's not. But when it is done well, it invariably involves the other two parts of the triangle, building capacity and strengthening relationships. That kind of engagement is meaningful and worthwhile, and has far greater benefits that go beyond just helping inform decisions. This is what we're aiming for in our project. So just a bit more about engagement. This is from the International Association of Public Participation, and it's a bit of a spectrum. And while there are definitely times when inform or consult are appropriate on these bits, sometimes that is appropriate. But if we expect to influence decisions, then we really need to be in the other end. We need to be in the involved, collaborate, and ideally empower end of the spectrum. And in terms of building capacity and strengthening relationships from the last slide, far more likely to happen if you are in the right end of that spectrum. Actually, for agencies too, being clear and honest and transparent about what level of influence the community can actually have is also really important, and that's often not consciously thought through. So, for example, is there much point doing fantastic engagement if then you can't influence anything? And so perhaps the share an idea was amazing engagement, but then it didn't lead to what people perhaps expected, so we get cynical and that leads to distrust. So, and also often we might get consulted about a decision, but then no decisions are ever made as a result. Or if we get consulted, we don't see how our views have been incorporated into the decisions. So step one, it's useful to be honest and transparent about what level we're talking about and what level the community can truly have. This is, I don't know, this is a fantastic slide. It's the Public Independent Republic of New Brighton, who's revolting. It's wonderful, there's a pier in there, as you can see. So it's a fantastic image. So getting back to the east and the birth of the How Team concept. In New Brighton we saw there was a lot of the inform and consult on issues that actually people really wanted to be involved and collaborated on, but we just consulted or informed. So pretty much the way the consultation was going between agencies and the community wasn't cutting it from the community perspective. People were frustrated at the slow progress, in particular around earthquake repairs, and the way the coastal hazards element of the district plan was dealt with was particularly bad, and that led to frustration, anger and protest from the community. There's a fantastic photo, but I wasn't clever enough to put it in here, of people burying their bums along the coast. Some of you might have seen that. That was in 2012. Yeah, so people felt strongly. So we don't have a disengaged community, we have an incredibly engaged community, and that's something to remember too, that when people are angry and upset, at least they're engaged. It's when things are quiet that, that means nobody is paying attention. But we also did see some very wary and frustrated and perhaps a little frightened agency staff who had to front meetings and deal with that anger back. So pretty much things weren't working well. It was pretty much we're in an impasse. So Renew Brighton approached the council to see if we could come up with a better way of working together with them. And so we didn't want the spirited and engaged nature of the community to be sidelined, but we did want it to be fostered, and we did want it to actually be effective. So the council provided some funding, and Sylvia, at the time was the manager of Renew Brighton, went out, talked to lots of people, probably including some of you in this room, and looked at different community engagement models, and came up with the concept of the How Team. So we like to use the bridge analogy, where the How Team is the bridge between the agencies and the community. Rather than throwing rocks at each other across the river, the bridge is a place where we can come together to design a good process. It's pretty simple. It's about working out how to have useful conversations and how to work together. So the HOW team is simply a joint community agency group with a convener from the community. So you might say, what makes that different from the standard community reference group? So it focuses on how to have a discussion, not what the decisions should be. So the HOW team's single focus is on making sure the process of engagement is appropriate to the community and as good as it possibly can be. We've assumed that if the process is good, the decisions are much more likely to be good. It acknowledges that the how you do it, is actually quite tricky to work out and needs care and attention. It's run by the community, not by the council or agency. It includes a mix of both community and agency members with equal status, and it pays community members for their time, and we also made sure we fed people and provided childcare costs. And people were chosen on their ability to listen and represent the common good, rather than as representatives of groups or demographics or single issues. So Renew Brighton presented this concept of the HOW team back to the city and to DCL and Regenerate Christchurch, and it was Regenerate Christchurch, and probably thanks to Paul Zanen, who gave us our first contract, which was pulling together a HOW team to come up with an engagement plan for Regenerate Christchurch when they were developing their work around a regeneration strategy for responding to earthquake damage and climate change. So our HOW team had 9 community members, including myself, and a representative from each of the 3 agencies involved in the project, which were Regen, the city and ECAN. We met once a week over 10 weeks and wrote an engagement plan. This is a copy of the poster that we stuck all around the community to find members for our group. So we've got a few assumptions behind the HOW team model. That community involvement and influence in the decision-making process is a positive thing and is best practice. That members from the community are more qualified than others to know how best to engage with their community. That a good engagement process, or getting the how right, will lead to better decision making, and as a result the decisions will be more acceptable to the community who are affected by them. The community will have a sense of ownership of the decisions, and that the agencies genuinely want the community to influence their decision making. Sorry. The next slide I forgot to check with Evan first. Sorry, Evan. When I took this, probably this is Evan. So this was after a very late night. We finished our engagement plan, and Evan was my litmus test for if we can get it past Evan and he's happy, then we've done a good job. So yeah, thank you, Evan. So this was the process we developed. The plan is yet to be fully implemented. We're in phase 1 and just started on phase 2 on the far left there. The project started and then stalled at phase 2. You may have seen the recent headlines in the paper. We're pleased to report to you that the project is all go again, like really full on go. We've got a meeting after this at 7:30 for the HOW team, and it's now being led by the City Council, so that's really positive. However, the project has changed a bit in relation to compared to the engagement plan we wrote. With the long delays, it was no longer appropriate to continue to put off addressing the earthquake legacy issues. The initial approach was that the earthquake legacy issues and the climate adaptation conversations were much part of the same conversation because they impact on each other. However, there was really strong feedback from the community that it was difficult to engage on climate change if they still had to face day-to-day earthquake legacy problems. So it's really good that they have been separated now. At the recent council meeting, the community concerns about wellbeing were listened to, and that's why they've been separated out. And given the earthquake legacy issues are now the priority issue to address, However, we've only got until August to report back on them, so now we have to kind of design a process for that part within the next 2 months and run that process, so it's quite a bit full on.
Could you read out the headings on that? We can't read
Okay, the key issues are what's it all about? That's the left one. Next one is what we know. The third part of the process is coming up with the options. The fourth phase is evaluating the options, and then the last part is writing the strategy. So that was how the engagement plan kind of, there's a whole lot obviously of stuff behind all those steps. So we kind of have to truncate that to come up with something for the engagement, for the earthquake legacy part. So what we hope to achieve? What we hope to achieve as a result of an excellent engagement process is getting the how right, getting the how right, is good decisions that are understood and accepted by the community. That people, and that means the community, people and agencies feel ownership of the decisions, even if they don't agree with them. That the well-being for the community and decision makers is intact, resilient and strong. And that the resulting plans will be adopted and implemented by the council and the community in a collaborative way going forward. And to get there, we need to keep a close eye on the process of engagement. So you can't read that, I know, but pretty much we've been working with an evaluator to actually really tease out what does all those steps of good engagement look like, and then measure how we're going and respond accordingly. So yeah, that's what we'd like to do. I just put in a quick word on retreat in response to some that coming up. I think Gary mentioned the R word. We often don't mention the R word. We don't want insurance companies to dictate the future of our community. Community-led design is crucial. That saying nothing about us without us is very much a catchcry of the HOW team and the project. We can't use the same tools we've always used. And if we need to retreat, it's not going to happen tomorrow. We still have life in us yet, and so when people talk about retreat, they forget that that's going to be many years to get to that point, and the community has to be fully involved in that. So don't talk about it as if it's just going to happen tomorrow. That really annoys everyone. And we also need support. We're all in this together. We might be the tip of the iceberg, or some people would argue other parts of Christchurch are worse off than we are. But we do need support, and we need to come up with new ideas and clever ways of doing things. So we do need everyone's thinking and thoughts around that. Yeah, that end.
Are we allowed to ask questions, Rachel?
No, we can ask questions after.
Okay.
That's right, I was here.
Yeah? Okay. Thanks for the invitation. It's really nice to be here. I'm going to talk about 3 things tonight. I've got 10 minutes and I've got 10 slides, but I've not managed to get it under 11 minutes. But anyway, around these 3 topics. First of all, I have a number of hats. I should declare which I'm wearing. I'm a member of the HOW team, but I'm not here tonight wearing that hat. I am the outgoing chair of CCRU, the Christchurch Coastal Residents United. I'm not here wearing that hat. I'm standing down from CCRU because the hat I'm wearing tonight is the interim director of the Brighton Observatory for Environment and Economics, a new research institute in New Brighton about adaptation. Okay, I'm going to talk for 2 or 3 minutes just about adaptation before I move on. I'm imagining most of you have seen diagrams like this. We have the reasons and the issues that are forcing climate, causes impacts, and we have to respond. There's 2 responses. One is called mitigation, which is reducing greenhouse gases. The other is called adaptation, which actually reduces the impacts. Now, let's imagine some miracle happens and the United States and China and India and parts of Eastern Europe and potentially Australia decide tonight, right now, we're going to stop emitting carbon dioxide and methane and N2O, nitrous oxide. Our braking distance on this is about 50 years. If that were to happen, effects are still going to be mounting and moving on a 50-year timescale. So, in any event, adaptation will be necessary. I have great admiration for those working in the mitigation area, and I'm sure there's things we can do ourselves, but for me, adaptation seems the obvious thing because we've got to do it anyway. Who's affected? Business, communities, government. This city, actually. It's a very interesting exercise. Look at the flood maps without any bums and without any walls. There are parts of South Shore and South New Brighton which are higher than many parts of Christchurch. Okay. So I'll take it as read that adaptation is necessary. A personal view only. If I look back 50 million years, which is about the time scale of the conditions we've got here now, sea level was between 10 and 20 metres higher than it is today. I'm pausing for a moment just so I get my head around it. However, the rate of that sea level rise, and this is the UK Parliament talking, not in me, but I'm quoting what they're saying, is many hundreds of centuries. They reckon 1,000 to 1,500 years. That's not our adaptation framework. This is not about getting populations and infrastructure above the 20-metre contour in tens of years. That's, I think, some of the worry that I hear, which is the reason I'm here tonight. So, adaptation is necessary. I'm going to assume I'm not going to really talk about the climate drivers. If we do it properly, we become internationally more competitive, we get wealthier, our economy gets larger, and hopefully more inclusive. But that's up to us. If we don't do it, if we adapt badly or don't adapt, we become poorer. More of us will find it more higher. More of us, New Zealand people, will die, and we become internationally less competitive. I had a friend, still have got a friend in Oxford, who went to the dentist quite a lot, and he talked about teeth, surprisingly much. And he said to me, "Simon, flossing's easy. Only floss the ones you want to keep." Economically, actually, we don't really want to lose. If you look at losing communities, if you look at losing infrastructure, it's the economy suffers. We don't actually need to throw any of them away, and we certainly don't need to do it quickly. I'll talk about why in a moment. So there are silver linings to adaptation, not my words, the Prime Minister's words, and I think she's much more proper than I am. I'd say this was understating it, but there are many silver linings. So, it's easy, it's obvious, we're going to adapt, great, okay, let's do it, but we don't quite know how. It pains me to quote Donald Rumsfeld, but nonetheless, he said, there are things that we know, there are known knowns, things we know that we do not know, they're known unknowns, and there are things that we don't know that we don't know, unknown unknowns. Unfortunately, adaptation is fish hooked with these things. Here's an example I'm going to spend 30 seconds on. It's from the One Health Eritrea conference, and it's about how the health sector adapts to climate change. And in here, you've got all the things you might expect from these three central circles. The big grey paper bag round it is the boundary of the effects of climate change. So climate change starts biting, and I would say that it's already biting in a small way, and these sorts of effects begin to happen, which lead on to other things. So it's hard enough getting one ministry to do one thing. It's, in my experience, pretty nigh impossible to bring 4 ministries together or 3 ministries to do something. Unfortunately, one of the big fishhooks in adaptation is its multi-agency. And that in itself is a real problem. Okay, so let's do a fine check.
You're fine.
Oh, good, lovely, thank you. New Zealand, how are we doing? Is our thinking wide enough? Well, zero carbon bill with a national adaptation plan, yes, brilliant. Sorry, my voice is going. However, our economy is an old economy. It reflects inequality and a lack of increase in productivity. Actually, we're not doing as well as we might like to kid ourselves in terms of our competitors. And what's our science, the science machine of New Zealand about? Well, my colleagues in the CRIs are looking how they can overturn many, many years of evolution on the bovine digestive system so that the cows produce less methane. If we do what we always did, we will get what we always got. And what we always got won't cut it. It's as easy as that. What should we be doing? Well, future-proofing organisations and businesses. I was really naughty in front of the council, city council recently, and I suggested to the chief executive that her organisation was becoming more vulnerable, not less, because she wasn't adapting her staff base to include adaptation experts. She never replied, but there were smiles, so I think I didn't offend her too much. Businesses. Most of them, this is not on their radar very much. There are notable exceptions. I'm talking to 2 national businesses who are realising that there's a problem, and they will be the ones who gather the silver linings from the adaptation that they do. We've got acting before thinking maladaptation, and I want to bring that into the South Shore, South Brighton. It's not just the coast. I recently spoke with, there's lots of them here, aren't there? Somebody really quite high up in ECAN, and said to this person, look, I'm looking at the next 50 or 100 years. Canterbury is a major part of the national economy. You've got so many risks in here. What's your planning? I noticed they've declared a climate emergency, which, great, happy, wave sounds maybe, I don't know. However, the person on said, it's the coast, it's flooding. So I said, okay, so you're quite happy that in the next 50, 70 years, you won't be able to keep cows outdoors. Oh, no, climate alarmism. It's big. We're talking about the coast now, but it's much bigger than the coast. Many more people will have many more problems than they think. Right, please breathe. Don't panic. This is a chemistry diagram, but we're not going to be doing chemistry. We could do chemistry. Up the top axis, this is the map of a journey from here to here. The top axis is difficulty. The vertical axis is how difficult that journey is, and the horizontal axis is progress. Now, this is where we are at the moment, and this is adaptation, where we want to be. Now, I love this diagram. Can I have a show of hands? How many people going back to dim, distant past remember this diagram at somewhere about O level? Right. I have to tell you, I've recently been a professor at the NUS. I'm still a visiting professor in Singapore, and that chemistry department is rated higher than Oxford internationally, allegedly. And I reckon half my graduates don't understand this diagram. It's one of the few diagrams in chemistry which brings thermodynamics and kinetics together in the same diagram. What's he talking about? Kinetics is really about how fast will a process happen. Thermodynamics is much bigger. You can talk about the end of the world with thermodynamics, but it tells you what's possible or what the end destination is. Two very important questions. So in terms of sea level rise, how fast will it happen and how bad will it get? And of course that second question depends on the timescale. Okay, with that type of view, I'm a climate and environmental scientist, a number of conclusions come out. Somebody said this evening, you know you are going to leave, you're going to have to leave, don't you? I said, yeah, we will. But if communities leave too soon, there's a massive economic hit, not just in property prices, on health budgets, police budgets. If you break societies and communities up, the fallout is horrendous. Or, if you stay too long, you end up with massive sunk investment, which you also don't want. So there's a sweet spot. But while they are there, those communities require infrastructure. The adaptation process is locally based trigger points to determine when a certain thing happens. Let's imagine Rocking Horse Road floods 4 times in 2 years. That could be a trigger point. Well, it has to be back modelled, obviously. And at that point, the trigger point is triggered and an agreed planning and other strategy kicks in. It's mutual. This cannot be done without communities. And actually, we're going to have to work differently to the way that we've always worked before. Because so far, most of us have been consulted. Actually, I go back to Rachel's thing, we actually need to be collaborative. Okay, and also, you need more tools than just planning. You need economics and you need ethics. Most of the stuff which is called adaptation in New Zealand would not be recognised as that in Europe, the UK, the US. 2 of us spent a couple of months in the UK interviewing government, central government, local government about how they're doing adaptation. It was an eye-opener. Okay, thank you. I've got 2 minutes, I think. Yeah, excellent. I don't need to talk about this. We were most of us here. We know what it's about. You might be surprised to know that South Shore and South New Brighton have had no substantive repairs since the earthquakes. The impact of the earthquakes was most severe in the east. The reason for this is, I'm afraid I do say it, I'm sorry for CCC people here, with total respect to you, it was due to a flawed decision that adaptation and earthquake repairs should be rolled in together. That was a mistake. Now, with absolute admiration for the council, 10 days ago, the council began to ask why, the councillors rather, began to ask why have there been no repairs in these 2 suburbs. And they're revisiting, or at least the implication is, that revisiting this policy which has so badly increased the degradation of well-being, made it worse from the earthquakes. Community well-being is not an optional extra. there is the Local Government Act and the Community Wellbeing Amendment, which makes it a duty on local authorities to support community wellbeing. And the one line that's brought me here tonight was a sum up of one of your insurance meetings. And somebody had written, when are South Shore and South Brighton going to learn they've got to leave? We know that. But at the moment, we need a little bit of humanity. If you have a spare 5 minutes, go to the council website, go to the council live on the 9th of May and listen to a senior general practitioner of one of the largest practices in our part of the world talk about the well-being of his, not parishioners, what are they? Oh, patients, thank you. He said, and this is a small part of it, and it was completely neutral, wasn't emotional, it was medic talk. He said, the earthquake destroyed our houses and damaged our lives, but the council's inaction has corroded our soul. We know we have to adapt, but we need to get repaired first, and people need to pull their lives together 8 years later before that conversation can really be entered. Thank you.
So, thank you, Simon and Rachel. Questions?
Yes.
Now, a very brief one, please.
Why is it brief? Why is it only brief with me?
I'm going to make it brief for everybody, but I just thought I'd give it first.
Thank you.
Rachel, you come to my house when you were setting up the whole team. The whole team is put together by Regenerate Christchurch, City Council and Eton. You work for Eton.
Okay.
Yes? No, oh, you do. I will be brief. What has happened after the whole team came around is nothing. What we actually put, I'm from the South Brighton Residents Association, and we actually put a vote of no competence to Regenerate Christchurch because nothing happened. We tried to engage for a year and a half, and now the whole team has been, how long? I don't know how. You tell me how long. Because nothing has happened, and what you want to communicate is something that we have been trying to communicate for many years, for nearly 9 years now, that we have a life-threatening risk because there are incorrect maps being used to address the earthquake damage that put many people's lives and households at risk. How are you going to communicate that?
Okay.
Yeah, I recognise, shall I answer first? I am on secondment from ECAN, so I don't work for ECAN, and when I'm working at ECAN, I do at the moment, I'm back there. When I work at ECAN, I work in the Ngaitahu relationship section, so I'm working about community engagement with Ngaitahu, so that's relevant. Yeah, that's why I had some skills to help the community also have a voice. So I don't work for Environment Canterbury at all in respect to this job. And we've been incredibly careful around that, so there's no association there. In terms of the delays you're talking about, those delays, the HOW team did its job under budget and within its time it had, so we pulled out all stops, had late meetings to get the engagement plan written within the 2 months. Yeah, we needed food. We had 2 months to write that, so we met every week to write that plan, and we got it done on time. So the delays have had nothing to do with the HOW team. So I want to be really clear about that. The HOW team has not delayed this project at all. So I just want to put that on the table. In terms of the issues you raise about risk to life, that is the kind of information that at the moment a very small group of people like yourselves understand that and have their heads around that and believe that to be the truth. The rest, a lot of the other people in the community, myself included, I've heard your view. I would like to hear other views as well. We need to get the information on the table so that everybody can understand it.
All here. We have all the
Yeah,
information
that's
here.
good. So it's part of the triangle of capacity building. The community, we all have a right to understand that information, and we all need to understand it, and we also have to hear other perspectives as well. So the council might have different views on that information, and I'd like to personally hear what other people have to say about that information too.
And look, I think it's worthwhile saying that in fact there are different people who have had awful experiences in Christchurch.
Oh, you can
Many.
say that. I had
No,
a meeting
excuse me.
with the mayor.
Excuse
I had
me.
a
I am
meeting of
speaking.
the mayor,
Excuse me.
15th of this
If
month, and
you-
he told me that the whole team didn't exist anymore. So that's a very
If you
mixed
are
messages.
unhappy with the way I'm running the meeting, you are more
Yeah.
than welcome to leave.
Yeah, sorry, I'm
Okay.
passionate. I'm very passionate
I
about
know you are passionate,
Yeah.
and there are degrees of unhappiness in the community all the way, but we are all in this together, and
I
we
agree
all
with
have
you.
to work on this together, and we will go from people who are completely happy to people who are completely unhappy. But this gathering is about a forum, so you've had your say. Thank you. Right, next.
Sorry, Rachel, you're standing there, but it was something that you said towards the end of your talk about liberating yourselves from being dictated by insurance companies. I'd just like to hear a bit more about that, maybe from both of the speakers, about how that might happen given what we're seeing insurance companies doing. I'm really interested to know what you've got to say.
I'll hand that to Simon, but as part of the engagement process with the community, this is the kind of thing that we would be looking at. What are they doing overseas? What have we got already? Let's all gather that information together. So we would expect the agencies to have done some work on that, and people in the community like Simon and lots of other people are doing heaps of research on that. I've been listening to webinars that are happening, so that it is out there. We just need to get it out on the table and look at those more closely. But that's part of the process. What else?
Okay. Yes. One. Yes. The maybe I'll paint a picture of what we found in Holland, what we found in France, and what we found in the UK. There, in the UK, the equivalent of the Insurers Association there have, instead of building back exactly what was there, they've entered an agreement with government to actually, in cases where it's an adaptation issue, to build better. That's consistent with New Zealand government's commitment to the Sendai framework, which says in situations of after a disaster, you have a legal responsibility to build back better. Now, for some reason, the New Zealand insurance market, maybe it's smaller, there are many reasons I won't speculate, they don't seem to have moved down that line at all. They're instead sticking to traditional insurance and not even evolving their offer. I mean, in France, one of the major insurance companies has evolved their offer. So they'll insure you, and if you get flooded out, and in many countries, including this one, flooding is the major source of insurance claims. What they will do is, providing you've got the right sort of house, they will pay once to upgrade your house, or they will remove it for you and take it to a place that they own, and at which point it's up to you what you do with that house. Now in New Zealand that model would work well, but do I hear New Zealand insurance companies talking about that? Do I hear creative thinking and evolution of a business model? I'm afraid I don't. Sorry, I don't know if I've answered your question. I might have had a rant.
It's not entirely build back better. They've also got managed retreat in areas where they're just letting houses fall off the cliff.
Okay, let's talk about the R word, managed retreat. Managed retreat is at the end of the adaptation spectrum, and it's coming to the realisation that, we can't live here anymore. Now, it could be because insurance companies aren't designed to cover certainties. They're designed to cover risks, and it's different. However, the problem of a difference with our insurance companies is there appears to be, and I say appears to be because I'm not an insurance person, there appears to be no or very little concept of the fact that people should stay where they are as long as possible, not too long, but as long as possible, which means they have a role in that. If those people go, their market disappears. This, I heard the deputy head of the German Insurance Association say, it's clear. My German is very bad. I think what he said in German was, are you stupid? We need customers. So, yes, managed retreat is there. People have to be there, communities have to be there as long as you can. Because if you lose a community, the economic damage is huge, as well as the social well-being damage. I don't know if I've answered your question. Please, if you don't feel I have, come back to me. Over.
No, I was just wondering, I don't know that you can necessarily strong arm global insurance companies, because I don't think New Zealand has insurance companies that aren't owned offshore. And isn't there a possibility, if the global warming is going to be over a certain amount of years, why doesn't local communities and the council and I don't know how they get their money, but surely there's council land or land that is TC1 that's further away, that's above the 5 metre designated height, and surely people from the affected parts of Christchurch could be incrementally moved over a certain amount of years so that people can evacuate without having it impact too strongly on their finances. Because a couple of weeks ago there was no, the insurance thing was saying that they were going, oh, sorry, okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry. Where you go?
Okay, I'll go first, then Rachel will follow me. That's a very creative idea. It's not an idea that's really emerged yet, but one of the things that in terms of adaptation, is a creative idea. There may be ways of doing it. Sorry?
Microphone.
Oh, sorry. Okay, it's a creative idea. It hasn't emerged yet. Yes, the red zone was one big exercise in that, but most of our population live within a very few kilometres of the sea. We can't do this all at once, and those that live there probably don't want to do it. I've just got there. I don't want to leave yet, and I'm not in danger. There will come a time when I will have to leave. I'll be dead by then, I think. But yeah, it's a creative idea. Rachel, do you want to add anything to that?
Just picking up people saying that has happened in other places, and I know people have talked about thoughts around, if you do have to move, or when we get to that part of the conversation in our good engagement process, so we'll be warmed up to using the R word, then it would be lovely to move as a community. And so unlike with the earthquake, everyone's spread and lost their community. there are ways, how can we maintain and retain our community, and how can we stay as east as we possibly can, and all those kind of things. And I also was talking to someone who had a house shifted on a barge, and her house had concrete foundations, which intrigued me because I thought that wasn't possible. So that gives me hope that maybe you could even keep your house as well. So I think all these ideas, and we have to be as creative as we can. That's the whole point of having a good engagement process, is those will come out as part of the options we look at.
And I think maybe we'll try and get the Chief Executive of the Insurance Council down here. I think we're asking people things that really aren't there. Chris, did you have a question? All right.
Gary, I do have a question here. A brief question, but it's very relevant. I have a question here. We are dealing with a situation where local government has gone to extensive lengths to protect itself. It hasn't taken care of the people. We have seen the planning regulations, rules and regulations which have taken place in Taylor's mistake. And we are seeing that, this is a standard that hasn't been known in Christchurch ever before. It's a place where you pay for your own flood protection, you pay for your own infrastructure. This cancer is gradually moving up the Avon River. This is very serious. And by doing this, the local government is removing the hope that people have been desperately looking for. This is called the Residential Unit Overlay, where the Resource Management Act belongs to history, and where sustainability is gone. And you mentioned, Simon, before GCIU and the decision to mix the earthquake damage where people sunk up to a meter below the tide of the Pacific Ocean. That was mixed with adaptation to future sea level rise, which basically has to do with what the ocean is going to do in the next 100 years. But if people are below sea level there, how can these people gain any hope in this current environment when the building rules and regulations and all the planning regulations here fail?
Thank you.
I'm not qualified to talk about individual cases,
This is whole area.
but this is the result of an earthquake. And there, sorry, am I not using this properly? Oh, okay. Thank you. This is the result from an earthquake, and it's earthquake damage. Now, if you've got houses 1 metre below sea level, and if they're flooding every tide, then clearly something has to be done, and there are probably 2 or 3 options. I'm not in any way, this is just thinking. One of the things is if the houses are of the right design, you can raise them. One of the things is you can move the houses, or one of the things is you can leave. It's a difficult situation. I don't know the details. I know we have spoken about some of these types of things, but there are options. But yeah, I don't believe it's hopeless, because in the end, people get their houses paid out and they leave. So I think it's just a number of options.
Right. To line.
Rosemary?
Hey, as somebody who doesn't live near Brighton and South Shore, it's been fantastic to listen to the project and hear more of what you're doing. So my question is about what's the role of the rest of the community in supporting and offering ideas, or what's our role? Because I feel sometimes the people left holding the can are there by a historical accident. You happen to be living there, and well, in a way, climate change. So the rest of us, if I live up the hill, I'm going to be all right. But what's our responsibility as part of that? It's spreading the risk and supporting communities like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, collective responsibility.
I mean, I think we're going to need economists and economists and people who can do that thinking around what are the other models around insurance, how can we, it is new thinking, and I think that's where we need help. Creative ideas, really, thinking outside the box. How can we, stay there as long as we can without being silly, But so people have got a lot to offer. And I think
it's keeping us informed too, that's the other thing, so that we are up with your story.
And I guess support as well. I think a lot of people in the area get really upset when there's negative media about them, like the photo of South Shore. People get really upset whenever anyone talks about climate change. They always show that photo, and it just really pisses people off because it makes it look like you guys are doomed. It gets read in a really negative way. So for media to not be kind of feeling like we're being picked on. Sure, we've got challenges, but so support.
Could I just add one thing about support? Council have 2 roles. One of individual councillors, the other is a collective responsibility.
Yes.
I think recognising that South Shore and South Brighton aren't some sort of sacrificial lamb off the edge near the sewage farm. Actually, collegial, that's the right word, the council together making decisions because we're part of the city, and as long as we can be, we want to stay part of the city.
Of course, that whole sewage farm is actually going to be underwater.
That's right.
The airport's not going to sort of stuff things up there.
Simon, this is a question for you. I was curious to hear you talk about the sea level rise being something that's going to take place over hundreds of years, and maybe I heard that wrong. But I'm just I've also heard that sea level rise, the World Bank report, or is it World Health Organization? The World something report is saying that 140 million people worldwide will be on the move by 2050 and 2 billion by 2100, which seems rather imminent, a little bit more imminent than what you were referring to. So I'm just curious if you could say something about that.
Can I clarify? So if I look at IPCC, and deep in the midst of time, cloud physics actually, I am an IPCC scientist, not this stuff, but earlier on. Current projections for 2100 are looking to be somewhere, and this is the problem, the longer the timescale, the greater the uncertainty, somewhere between 0.5 and a metre, maybe even a bit more.
For when?
For 2100. Could be a bit more, could be a bit less. I'm not too worried about that. The reason you've got so many people on the move is large parts of the world are very, very close to sea level. Southeast Asia, I was there for 5 years in Singapore. I mean, you're almost paddling around. I did some, I think I can say this, I did some work for the Singapore government about how their airport's going to adapt. It's 1.5 meters above sea level. So, yeah, your numbers, I wouldn't know, I haven't read the report you're talking about, but there will be lots of people. Something New Zealand have to think about, I suggest, many other countries, is how we treat climate refugees. The world's going to be moving. So I may have confused you with the time scale. If you're talking about the 10 or 20 metres, that's on a lot longer time scales. Sorry.
Coming back to the matter of insurance companies and parking our views as to how well EQC work, has the government or the system ever considered the fact that I would personally rather pay my $2,500 a year that I'm paying to state insurance for house and contents and pay it to EQC? So in other words, instead of us all paying insurance to insurance companies for the profits go to Geneva, New York and London, it could all go into EQC. Is that a naive thought, or has that ever been considered? Yes. At least it would keep it inside the tent, within our country.
Well, it's our history. Insurance, and it was that's our history.
I think let us deal with. We did have somebody here speaking very lucidly on insurance recently, and I think the key thing is that it's the underinsurers, and it was the largest hit, the second largest hit ever in Christchurch, and one of the things that I think we've got to remember is we're a barnacle on the backside of progress, really. We're at the end of the world. We're a small community and spread over a pretty shaky place. And one of the things that the insurance companies, of course, they'll be interested in France and Germany and all that because there's huge populations. But we're a real risk for insurance companies. So, but let's get the Chief Executive of the Insurance Council down here and let's hear what he has to say. But I think I think EQC might be, with the greatest respect, Dave, they're broke right now. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Kathleen, last question.
Kia ora, Simon and Rachel. Yeah. I was just wondering if you were in touch with the other communities around the city, like Sumner and Wood End and Pines Beach and so on, Hudson. You know, there's you know, we've got a lot of communities that are on the water's edge.
Yeah, I've not even heard North Beach mentioned.
And,
what's the deal?
You know, and there's also all the peoples living by rivers, by the sides of rivers all around the city, who are really in the same predicament. And I just wondered if you sort of saw everybody as a community rather than, you know, as sort of social.
I think that's a really, really good point, and that is something that would be really useful to do. Yeah, and there's been some little startings of that, but there is, more to be done. And even listening, hearing back from Hawke's Bay, where they have been doing quite a lot of work up there, and hearing from their community in South Dunedin as well.
Hi Rachel and Simon. Look, all I've heard tonight is about the people of South Shore, which has really been very interesting, really, really interesting. But I am concerned that, you know, we're not the only species on the planet. And sometimes when I hear Councillor East talking, I'm kind of...
He's right up behind you.
So, Councillor East and others along around South Shore, is there an awareness and a thought and a consideration of the other species that we're cohabiting with in the city, particularly the estuary?
So just to reassure you that when we're doing this next piece of work on the earthquake damage, we're making sure that the voices are in the room that have got views around the ecology and so on. So so very conscious we need to have that diversity of views, and I think we can have, I think everyone can work things through. I think the thing is we've never actually sat around a table together. You know, really we haven't. So I think it can be quite simple.
Okay, that's a good point to finish on. We'll have a public lynching of Councillor East later on. It's very good that you're here, Dave, because it's really important we're all in the room together, and that's one of the points that is important tonight. That we, you know, this is a community that has been beaten about, and it was beaten about again on the 15th of March. And we've got a lot to teach each other, but we've got a lot to teach the world. And I think that the process that you guys have put together is just magnificent. And I'm sorry it wasn't around when I was on the council, you know, to this level of understanding, because I think we could have made a whole lot of decisions that we made a whole lot better. But look, the community, I liked what Kathleen was saying, that there's a whole lot of communities in Christchurch that, you know, we've got a councillor here to take that back to the council table to say, hey, we're all in this together. I think that's really important. So Dave, that's your responsibility. And I'll be checking, no pressure, but I'll check next week. Plenty of time. But it is important, though, that we support those that are badly hurt, and we support those who are at risk, and we support those who are coming up with the ideas, because the ideas will not be conventional. And so I'd just like us all to thank these guys for what they've done, what they're doing, and what they'll continue to do. And we, as a community, are in behind you, but as a community, we'll learn from you. So thanks very much.